What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic, and I am back with a collection update. Got some interesting odds and ends here. Picked up some stuff randomly at the record store, and even had some cool stuff sent to me as well, actually by the band Becerus, which they sent us a cool care package. Included this shirt, obviously. They also included copies of the new album and some other stuff, actually, projects they're attached to, which I thought was really cool. We also got a couple from the Metalhead box, of course, because there's always some stuff from the Metalhead box in these. And there's some double dipping and triple dipping in here in terms of some bands too. So yeah, let's just get right down to it. Sargeist, Satanic Black Devotion. This is the debut album from this Finnish black metal act. I've been into this band for a while, and sadly, I just don't have that much of their stuff in my collection. I've had Let the Devil In for years. I love that album, and I just keep forgetting to follow up and get more Sargeist. So I saw this in a used bin, picked it up, and I was like, all right, cool. Probably get some like old school like 90s stuff here. And I had totally forgot that this band is not that old, honestly. I mean, they've been around for over 20 years, which I think that kind of makes you a little bit old. But I thought this band came out in the 90s and this debut came out in 2003. Doesn't sound like it though. Honestly, this album sounds exactly like this album cover looks. This is icy cold tremolos, blast beats, ghoulish vocals, very lo-fi production, but it is mixed pretty well. This, pretty much to no one's surprise, has a very second wave sound. It has that raw, cold sound that you expect from like, Mayhem, Darkthrone. I can just kind of roll down a list here of bands that have this sound that did it before this band, but it does it really well. In fact, I really like the tremolos on here. There's a lot of great dissonant melodies. The vocals are appropriately ghoulish and cavernous. Kind of do get a little old because they are kind of one note on this one, but lots of melody. And to its credit, this does get a little bit riffy. I generally prefer my black metal a little bit more on the riffy side. The song Black Fucking Murder, I really dig that one. It kind of breaks up the blasts a little bit. Some like, groovier patterns, and you do get some like kind of thrashy accents in there. Panzer God in particular too is also a little bit on the thrashier side. You get some punkier, snarlier D beats. It just feels like a meaner, more aggressive song. Like it's not trying to be explicitly evil. It's just trying to be like rowdy and kind of like early Mayhem, a little bit of Celtic Frost mixed in there. Glorification's a little bit more mid-tempo too. This is a really solid debut. Overall, I would probably take Let the Devil In over this. I just feel like it's a little bit more polished. And again, I think the riffs really jump out a lot more in here. But this was a really good start for this band. And once again, I just need more Sargeist in my collection. I've liked pretty much everything that I've heard from them. I just keep forgetting to actually purchase the albums. Again, if you're a big fan of Mayhem, Darkthrone, Satyricon, Marduk, anything that sounds remotely like that, check this album out. It's really solid. I might recommend Let the Devil In a little bit more than this one, but yeah, I still dig this. This is good stuff. Seraphic Entombment Quelled. This is a reissue of this Alabama deathdoom atmospheric death metal band's first demo. We actually went over their full-length debut, Sickness Particles Gleam, a while ago. In fact, both tracks that are on this demo are on that album. Features current and former members of bands like Grave Ritual, Father Befouled, Ecto Void, Cemetery Filth, and this is just raw, filthy, disgusting death doom. In comparison to the full length, in terms of when they re-record the songs, these songs are notably more raw. There's not a lot of the extra atmospheric elements, which the two songs in here are Vault of Vision and Carried by Claws. Both are killer tracks on the full length, but this sounds, again, way more underproduced. In fact, it sounds like it's a live take, like they just kind of sat around a tape deck and just kind of recorded this in a, abandoned building or something like that. That feels like the proper aesthetic for an album like this. It's gloomy, the riffs are murky and thick and disgusting, but again, I went back and listened to them on the full length, and the additional atmospheric elements and the fact that there was a little bit more clear in there, like the vocals occasionally can be a little hard to make out on here versus on the full length, they cut through the mix perfectly. And hearing these songs in their more stripped down versions, honestly, is kind of cool. This sounds like you're just kind of part of an intimate jam session where they're trying to conjure up the devil or something. The production, or lack thereof, it does give it a little bit more sinister quality in a way. And the songs in here are a little bit more condensed. They are lengthened a little bit more on the full length. They kind of draw out the atmosphere and a little bit more like the droning sections on there. But honestly, I would probably go for the versions on the full length overall. They did kind of just add a lot to the songs, and I feel like they're just constructed a little bit better. Still though, this was a fun pickup. Getting to hear those 2 tracks in their more raw form are pretty awesome. And if you're a big fan of bands like, I don't know, like Hooded Menace, got Coffin Worm, since I just went over them not too long ago. Stuff that is very dissonant and just kind of snarly and ugly, Dragged into Sunlight maybe too. Check this out. I recommend the full length though. Sickness Particles Gleam is a pretty solid album, but this is still pretty damn good too, so check it out. Alright, we got a pair here from StarGazer. We have their second album, A Great Work of Ages, and their fourth album, Psychic Secretions. This is an Australian avant-garde, blackened death metal act, dissonant death metal act. I don't know if I would go with avant-garde here, just because when I think of avant-garde, it's generally something decidedly more strange and more challenging to listen to. This is definitely challenging, but more in like a technical and progressive sense. Anyway, this band features current and former members of bands like Mournful Congregation, Cauldron Black Ram, Denouncement Pyre, and probably a litany of other Australian death metal and black metal acts, because Australia's scene is very incestuous. But I got in this band with their album Emerging to the Boundless, and I was absolutely blown away by the intricate songcraft, the dissonant atmosphere, and just, the amazing riff work. This band is kind of hard to classify because it's such a blend of different things, but again, it feels more like progressive in a way. A Great Work of Ages is definitely the more raw of the two here, but man, like this album runs like a combination of like Immolation, later Gorguts, Coroner, Blotted Science, and maybe a little bit of Time Ghoul kind of like thrown in there for good measure. The atmosphere is spacey and sinister, but man, the riff work, like this is just riff a minute. I mean, so is this one, but I'm not talking about this one yet. I'm talking about this one. Probably going to say a lot of the same things. The biggest difference between these two, I would say, is production's a little bit more raw and gritty. The guitars kind of sound a bit dirtier on here. They both definitely like genre surf, because you could be listening to a section that is, packed with thrash metal riffs and like DB gallops, and then go into like almost psychedelic territory at times, and then go full tilt into black metal, death metal breakdowns, death doom sections. It's all on both of these, and both of these are absolutely awesome. This one sadly doesn't have the tracks listed on the back, but I know the last song in particular is just one hell of a ride. Like it starts off like a psychedelic jam, a lot of great bass playing on both of these. I believe it's fretless. You get a lot of those smooth, like proggy bass lines you would associate with like, Atheist or like Cynic. Crazy drum work too, and lots of like creative drum patterns. And I'm just gonna switch over to this one too. I want to say on the song Pilgrimage, there's this section of like snare rolls and such that they turn into like a blast beat pattern, and the riff section on top of that is just super creative. This album pretty much does everything that this album does, but I think with better production, it's a little bit more crisp sounding, and you can make out everything a little bit more. I'll also say that this one in particular is a little bit more melodic, but like in a progressive metal sense. Maybe the way to describe this one is it's less chaotic, but just as complex. It just feels more fluid in terms of the transitions. This one, the transitions at times can be a little bit jarring, but nonetheless, it's just impressive as hell. The atmosphere in here is a little bit different too. It feels like a little bit more cosmic and ethereal, whereas this one definitely has a lot more of a sinister sort of vibe too, like cosmic, but like cosmic dread, I guess. And I just love the songwriting on both, but I mean, if I had to pick a track, namely because they're not listed on the back here, All Knowing Cold. That song with its kind of like crawling, slippery, almost kind of like jazzy riffs and bass lines in there, and the strange grooves. I dig that song. Like it just has this kind of strange, like weird swagger to it. Both of these albums are amazing, and pretty much everything that I've heard by this band has been just jaw-dropping. If you're a big fan, again, of later Gorguts, I would definitely throw in Atheist, Vector at times. It's kind of comparable. Some of their genre hopping kind of reminds me a bit of like White Ward's last album. This band is absolutely amazing, at least in terms of everything that I've heard so far. I think I'm only missing like one of their albums, maybe an EP or two. I don't know. I know I'm just going to keep picking up stuff by this band in the future because, yeah, this is absolutely killer. Check it out. All right, so these next three are by the same band, and they have these in the used section of my local record store, and I was like, well, that's literally, I think, all of the full lengths that I'm missing by this band. Let's just snag them all. And that band is Unholy. This is their debut album, From the Shadows. I actually got a demo collection by this band not too long ago, and this actually features a lot of material from it. This is Finnish death doom, honestly probably one of the more well-known Finnish death doom bands. This came out in 1993, and up until this point the only album that I owned by this band was their last album, Gracefallen. They ended up breaking up not too long after that and pursuing other projects, and I really enjoyed that one. And then hearing the demo collection, I was like, man, this band kind of started off really weird, and weird definitely went into this first full length. This is light years different than Gracefallen. This is way more raw. The guitars are very sizzly and crackly. They're not particularly that thick, very prominent bass, and vocals that sound like someone being waterboarded, like kind of somewhere in the studio. Like, you know, for the high screams, they just smash his big toe with a ball-peen hammer or something like that, and the rest of the time they're just choking him and fucking beating the shit out of him. It's quite a harrowing performance, honestly, and it's a big part of the atmosphere. But musically, man, this is strange. This borders more on like avant-garde. Like, I would say this sounds more avant-garde than either one of those StarGazer albums, though, you know, drastically different styles. This is like if Syd Barrett decided to do death doom in that weird alternate reality that I just came up with in my head. That feels kind of right with this. In terms of like song structure, the songs are kind of like all over the place. The transitions can be, you know, very abrupt and again, very strange. The atmosphere in here is very uncomfortable. You have a lot of like, you know, strange, gloomy, gothic synths throughout. They have that 80s sort of horror vibe, but there's definitely like a gothic tinge. And again, like the vocals creating a lot of this strange atmosphere. Like you'll have clean passages and they sound woeful and regretful and all of that, and then out of nowhere you'll just have a blood-curdling scream. The song Grey Blow in particular, it feels more like performance art than, you know, an actual song. Like this is almost like stream of consciousness writing. You have like hand drums that show up in there. It's very discordant at times, but very unique for like, you know, death doom in general. Like this really doesn't sound like a lot of death doom that I own. There are some like big standout moments on here in terms of like heavier sections. Autumn, I think, is a particular good one. Colossal Vision, Time Has Gone has some like faster, more up-tempo sections that kind of, you know, feel like a little bit more straightforward death metal. But you also have songs like Passe Termis, I don't know how to say that, and Stench of Ishtar, which I would just call flat out funeral doom. Way more slow, way more lumbering, way more droning, but just as haunting and weird. This is a really interesting debut. Like, flat out, this is just strange and kind of a weird, unsettling listen. But honestly, it's pretty good, and it's definitely creative as hell. Like, I can't really think of a lot of, like, you know, early death doom that sounds quite like this. And that's both good and bad, but this was a pretty solid debut. I dug it. And then we get to their second album, the second Ring of Power. Now this one definitely shows like a little bit of an evolution in their sound. Like it still has its fits of weirdness. In fact, I would say this probably has one of the weirdest tracks that I have heard from this band on it. But at the same time, I feel like there was definitely a forward progression in terms of like writing more coherent songs, at least, you know, more coherent than the first one, maybe. It does have better production, so there's a little bit more clarity to it. And I will say that they have like some more like just straightforward droning, heavy, straightforward riffs. There's still a lot of like atonal strangeness. And on this one, they added some particularly haunting female vocals, which, you know, the male vocals when they're clean are pretty damn haunting too, but they got another layer on here, which honestly kind of worked on here. Lady Babylon, Neverending Day, and Air all have these female vocals, and they're almost kind of like spoken wordish, but they're definitely still like, you know, carrying a tune. And they do create some really interesting harmonies on here for sure. But they definitely fit with like the rest of the vocals on here. They feel just like a little bit off, a little strange, a little unsettling. There's even like creepy whispers on here in songs like Dreamside and Covetous Glance. But I think because the riff work is a little bit more straightforward, like you get, you know, more of those stereotypical droning, monotonous riffs that you expect from, you know, Death Doom and Funeral Doom. And it actually makes for some catchier songs. Like Covetous Glance, I think, is kind of this pretty, like, lush, atmospheric song. It's still dark and haunting, but the melodies on it are very catchy, and it has some, like, really cool dynamics with, like, shifting the tempo of the song. It feels like it flows a little bit more in a straight line, which to this point hasn't happened that much. And I feel like they kind of almost immediately corrected that with the last track, Serious Personality Disturbance and Deep Anxiety, which the song is pure avant-garde nonsense. All right, maybe that's like a tad unfair. It's a very weird song. It opens up with like skittering violins and what sounds like a cat walking across a piano because the whole melody, it doesn't make sense. You have these weird moaned vocals. It's very atonal. The structure is very odd. There is a section on there with this really cool drum and bass groove. Like, I don't know, it almost kind of like reminded me of Talking Heads, except it's like Funeral Doom because, you know, like Tina Weymouth's bass lines are absolutely amazing, but it kind of has this like funky, drunken swagger to it. That was probably the only moment on that song that I could like really like latch onto, like, oh, that's like some interesting music, and then it descended back down into the weirdness. But I do see this as a bit of an improvement overall in terms of like, you know, getting like a more defined direction in the band's sound. But honestly, the biggest change would be we got down to the third album, Rapture. This is closer to Grace Fallen. So this one instantly had more familiarity, like, oh yeah, this is straightforward Death Doom. It's a little bit more melodic. It is 100% less avant-garde. Still loads of atmosphere. It still feels dark and oppressive, but it also has more melody. And if I had to guess, I think the change in guitarist, because the guitarist that was on the first two albums left the band and they had some new members in here, I think that change kind of made them change as well. Like the songs became more straightforward. The melodies became more hooky. It became, you know, kind of more or less what you expect from Death Doom, and it kind of stripped out a lot of the avant-garde elements, and honestly made this a whole hell of a lot more listenable for me. You still have the haunting female vocals that show up occasionally. I believe it is a different singer on here, but everything feels way more organized. The riffs are stronger, the production's better. It doesn't feel like every song is trying to make some like strange artistic statement. It just feels like they're trying to write just solid songs. There's some longer, more drawn out songs, again, like a little bit more Funeral Doom-ish. Wonder Work, it's spelled all strange. And the absolutely bleak song Wretched. These feel, again, like more straightforward, like Funeral Doom. They let the atmosphere drone out, and again, with this better production, it feels full, it feels bigger. The synths on here sound so much better too. On Wretched in particular, that one like really captures the funeral vibe. In fact, it almost sounds like someone did like a tribute to like a military funeral. Like you have the marching snares, these big droning single chords. It feels like a legit funeral dirge. But again, this one has like, again, moments of beauty and like great melodies and such. Like this just feels almost like an entirely different band. Even the vocals kind of like drew back the theatrics a bit and just were delivering like more solid clean hooks and, you know, just solid roars. So yeah, out of the batch, this is probably my favorite, but then again, I started with Grace Fallen, and this is much closer to Grace Fallen. But honestly, I liked all of them for different reasons. The first two are admittedly like very strange albums, but they're kind of alluring with the strange off-kilter songwriting. But I really enjoyed hearing this band kind of come together over the course of these three albums and start writing like more straightforward hooky songs. If you're a big fan of God man, like avant-garde funeral doom and death doom. Like there's stuff in here that reminds me of Hooded Menace. There's stuff in here that reminds me of like esoteric and funeral and skepticism too. It really depends on when you catch this band, like what album, hell, even what song, but recommend checking out Unholy. This is a really interesting band overall. Shrieking Demons, Diabolical Regurgitations. This is the debut EP from this Italian death metal act. This is one of the albums that Becerus sent to us in the care package because they actually share members with this band. And I had seen this album in Caligari's distro for a while now. This came out in 2021. And I just never pounced on it, probably because I was pouncing on literally everything else in there. But we just reviewed their debut full length, absolutely killer old school death metal. That album sounds like it was plucked right out of like 1990 or 1989. Absolutely love it. Still need to get my copy of it. But this band also shares members with Assumption, Cancer Spreading, and, well, the next band that I'm going to bring up. And this is just riffy old school death metal. Plain and simple. Like this album, this band in general, I think they have their roots firmly planted in the old guard of bands like Death, Autopsy, a little bit of Morbid Angel, and I would say a lot of Obituary too. A lot of groove, a lot of riffs. My God, this band just knows how to write classic, disgusting, old school death metal riffs. Well, it starts off with more of a classic sort of Sabbath sound with Water Drop Torture. It slowly kind of morphs into this, like, again, very old school death metal sound, very akin to like Death Breath too. Like you get some thrashy, punky riffs in there. Lots of D beats. Hidden Cathedral of Diseases is definitely good for that. You get those sharp autopsy-like transitions where it's going like full bore and then slows down to a crawl. In comparison to the full length, I would say that this one is a little bit more groove oriented. Like both of them have riffs for days. And in terms of production, pretty similar. Like this one's a little bit more raw, a little bit more stripped down, but that's kind of the vibe on the full length too, though you can definitely tell there's like more in the way of like production quality to it. But this one isn't necessarily as like fast and, you know, like kind of thrashy as the full length. And even in terms of like the grooves on here, it's not always like that straightforward like mid-tempo death metal you think of, you know, like Bull Thrower or Obituary. Sometimes it does get kind of like death doomish. The opening and closing tracks in here, Water Drop Torture and Whispering Corridors, there's a lot of like more like doom-laden, kind of like lurching, menacing riffs on there and kind of more plotting rhythms. There really was not like a tremendous amount of that in the full length, so it is kind of cool to hear like there are some differences in terms of where they started to where they are now. The main thing is though, they had riffs either way. The riff work in here is fucking killer. Unspeakable Rights, I absolutely love the tremolo harmonies on there. Yeah, this EP is all killer, no filler, rooted in stuff that I already knew I would love because I own it and love it. If you're a big fan of like early Death, Autopsy, Benediction, Obituary, stuff like that, check this EP out and check out their full length. Their full length is absolutely crushing. Honestly, one of my early favorites for this year. So yeah, check this band out for damn sure. Next up, we have a split here from Bottomless and Witching Altar. This is the Graveyard Thunder split. Came out last year, and these are two doom metal bands from two different parts of the world. And the one that is associated with Becerus is Bottomless. But first, gotta talk about Witching Altar because they had the first tracks on here, and I figured why would we go out of order. This is a Brazilian doom band. And immediately I was reminded of like bands like Down and Orange Goblin. There's definitely a little bit of sludge to it. The guitar tone is thick, meaty. It's got kind of a, again, like a sludge metal crunch to it, but it also has that sort of like doom warmth to it. While it starts out a little bit more like up-tempo, as soon as you get down to the second track, it brings all the doom and gloom it possibly can. Very woeful vocals, kind of similar to Candlemass, definitely more along the lines of Johann than, you know, Messiah. It's not like vibrato driven and epic. Some good long slow builds to the song. There's a little bit of like classic heavy metal in terms of like some of the harmonies in there. Like they're not all doom and gloom. A lot of reverb. Tons of reverb, especially on the vocals, which is good and bad. Like good because you kind of need that to kind of give it that doomy atmospheric quality. Bad because I think they're also doubling and doing a lot of reverb. So you get, you know, a little bit too much. Like, it sounds like they recorded this in like the biggest, most echoey cave they possibly could. And at times there's like some weird overlap with like some of the reverb. It doesn't quite sound right. But overall, I enjoyed their sound. But Bottomless was kind of the one that won out because there's a little bit of that witchcraft, sort of like retro, like occult rock to it. It's not the most heavy stuff on here. And honestly, I don't even give a shit if I get shit for it. It kind of sounds like early Ghost. It has those haunting, gloomy vocals, but they really do carry a tune, and like all the songs are catchier than hell. It just has that spooky quality like the Devil's Blood, where it's not necessarily always about being heavy. It's about kind of like creating that atmosphere. And again, riffs. Like, this band has like riffs almost like The Sword, and I'm a big fan of The Sword. So yeah, this was a really cool split. I didn't even know these guys had a doom band too. It seems like most of their stuff is more rooted around death metal, but yeah, no, these guys are really good at doom too. But yeah, both bands are killer. If you see this split, check them both out. I definitely want to check out more by both bands in terms of like individual releases. But yeah, if you're a big fan of just like more retro sounding doom, and again, kind of like more along the lines of occult rock, check out honestly both of these bands. The Foreshadowing, New Wave Order. This is the 5th album from this Italian gothic doom metal act. I own their album Oinos? I'm not even really sure how to say that word. I had kind of forgotten about this band for a while until someone in the comments reminded me, like, oh hey, this band came out with a new album, you should check it out. And I was like, hey, I remember that band. And I ended up picking it up. And this is, you know, pretty much kind of what I expected. Very straightforward, melancholic, gloomy, woe is me doom metal. Gothic synths, mournful vocals, a lot of dreary goth rock harmonies, especially the song Heraclitus. No, that sounds dirtier. A lot of this I would definitely compare to like Paradise Lost, though not as heavy. Like, you don't get a lot of like gruffer vocals on here. In fact, in terms of like outright heaviness, a lot of these songs kind of have like more of a like heavier goth rock sort of vibe, like very similar to Cemetery Skyline. Honestly, it isn't until like the last 2 tracks in here, Eyes of a Dawn and Vox Dia, that it does get notably more sinister, more like of that oppressive doom metal sense, especially Vox Dia, which is slower, more menacing. It's got a really heavy bridge on it. And even the vocals and melodies on Eyes of a Dawn are a little bit more gruff, a little bit more sinister sounding. A lot of this, you know, kind of stays in this very melancholic vein. There's a good chunk of this that reminds me of The Last Swallow of the Sun, though not as bright, but it does kind of have that like sort of like lush sound overall. It's very melody driven. The vocals for the most part are, you know, these just, again, like woeful croons. They're really solid. But I did go back and listen to Oinos, the one that I have. And this one definitely isn't quite as heavy. In fact, there's a lot more in here that I would say leans a little bit more towards rock overall. Not a bad thing. I think they do it really well, but I was kind of looking for a little bit more of that like heavier, oppressive doom sound, which is definitely on the album that I can't say. That one feels a little bit more balanced. Like, yeah, you have the big goth rock hooks, but you also have like more doom-laden sections and like gruffer, more like just dark, sinister melodies that show up to kind of balance it out. This one I feel like was a little bit more about the hooks overall, which I think they do a solid job of. It's just that it's missing some of the elements of, you know, the sound that I really grew to like with, again, the album that I can't say. Still, overall, if you're a big fan of, you know, more melancholic gothic metal, again, Cemetery Skyline and Paradise Lost, but not like the heaviest side of Paradise Lost. Like, this is definitely heavier than Host, but it's a little bit more of that like kind of coming out of that alternative electronic period that Paradise Lost had and kind of like regaining steam. Like, the vocals are all clean for the most part. Even the more gruff ones on here are still like more tuneful. Like, there's not any big growls or anything. Maybe like a little bit of catatonia too. If you're a fan of any of those bands I brought up, check this out. Pretty solid offering. Cerebral Hemorrhage, Exempting Reality. This is a 2025 reissue of this New York brutal death metal act's lone full length. I actually had this down as a new release on our new release calendar because I had never heard of this band before. And then I found out that this was a reissue. I was like, all right, well, this is a one and done album. So naturally, I'm kind of interested. And then when I looked it up, like, wow, people really seem to like this. And honestly, it ended up being a lot more than I thought it was. Like, this is definitely brutal death metal. You got the pingy, plunky snare. You got the absolutely just gnarly vocals, lots of like chromatic slam chugging and brutal tremolos. Like, it checks off like pretty much all the boxes that have been checked off by, you know, like Dying Fetus, Suffocation, and God, I would say like Internal Bleeding to some degree too. But there are some things in here that do make this stand out. Like, it's very technical. I would say it's more technical than Suffocation or Internal Bleeding for sure. Like, there's a lot of stuff in here that I think is kind of like overlap with like Cryptopsy and even to a degree Defeated Sanity. I don't think it's quite that technical in terms of like the weird transitions and jazzy breaks that Defeated Sanity is known for, but there are definitely elements of that in terms of like the more technical play on here. Abuse of Power, Null and Void, Deranged Perception. These songs have these crazy technical fits with, you know, just like these weird runs on the guitars and just complex rhythms and such. But this band also is really good about just settling into like straightforward, heavier than fuck grooves. The title track, Resulting in Homicide, and Remnants of the Final Solution. All those songs have just massive grooves that get stuck in your head. Remnants of a Final Solution has a lot of cool like dissonant melodies. There's even like a really cool clean break in that one too. Well, the vocals are like deep, gnarly roars. They aren't quite that like low kind of like burped vocal. It's kind of almost like a deeper version of like, you know, like Glenn Benton's roars. It's more projected and less kind of gurgled. There's a good mix of like the typical tropes of brutal death metal here and like some atypical stuff to kind of make it stand out. It's not so technical where it becomes like just an absolutely insane equation that you have to figure out in your head, you know, Defeated Sanity. But it's also not just like the stripped down kind of like proto slam sound that you got with like Internal Bleeding. There's this like middle ground in terms of like complexity and riff writing and brutality where this album hangs out. And honestly, I feel like I've already talked about it too much because I wouldn't mind saving this for a retro review. I think this is pretty damn awesome. I'm not even like the biggest brutal death metal fan, but I have to say the songwriting here is damn good. Yeah, if you're a big fan of Cryptopsy, Suffocation, again, a little bit of Defeated Sanity, though not quite as like just batshit crazy. And again, like some like Dying Fetus style riffing and such. Check this out. This is really good. Immortal Form, Ashes of a Fallen World. This is the debut EP from this DC-based death metal act. One of the albums I got in a recent Metalhead box, and dude, this thing's absolutely awesome. This thing wasted no time making its presence felt. This is very old school, straightforward death metal, big, heavy, gnarly tone on here. Like the guitar tone in here means business. It's chuggy, it's aggressive, but it also has like a thrashy, hardcore bite on here too. Like this has like the punch of like Bolt Thrower and like, you know, Obituary and stuff like that, but with like almost like a crossover thrash slash hardcore sort of energy to it. It's explosive, it's pretty raw sounding. Like in terms of the Bolt Thrower album that I'm thinking of for this one, it's probably more like Realms of Chaos. Like you kind of have that like more unhinged energy on it. It's a little bit swampier. And of course, because I'm comparing it to Bolt Thrower, it's absolutely chock full of riffs. I dig the production here too. Like it's pretty raw. It's really thick though. I like that. Like everything kind of has like an additional weight to it. Like the drums hit particularly hard. The vocals are very powerful roars and screams. You got hefty breakdown grooves. There's even some dissonant melodies too. And in terms of the atmosphere, there's not too much of it though. There is an interlude on here, which yeah, all right, it's an EP. I'm really not a fan of like interludes and EPs because you got, again, that limited amount of time on them. But to this interlude's credit, it is an awesome excerpt from Exorcist 3. It's George C. Scott's whole monologue when he is literally shouting at the devil while pinned against the wall. I love that movie. It almost rivals the first one. But yeah, this is just short, menacing, abrasive, vicious, just gnarly old school death metal. This thing is an absolute kick in the teeth, and I already want to hear more from this band. If you're a big fan of, God, I would say like Frozen Soul, a bit of Enforced too, though like more death metal leaning. Gate Creeper, of course, Bull Thrower, Obituary, lots of killer heavy bands. Check this out. This thing's awesome. And finally, we have Cemetery Lights, The Underworld. This is the first album from this one-man Rhode Island blackened death metal act, black metal act. Just missed the cut for the Rhode Island States of Metal video, and I initially thought like, hey, maybe let's just kind of wait this one out, jam this one, see if we can throw it in there. And I'm glad I sampled a little bit of it before actually sitting down and listening to the entire album because, well, it probably would have ruined the flow of that video because I don't have a lot of positive things to say about this. Someone in the comments actually warned me about this one in terms of the Metalhead unboxing with this one in it and said like, dude, this isn't good. I was like, well, all right, you know, different structure, different folks. Maybe they just don't like certain aspects. And, well, no, that person was right. Like, kind of across the board, this really isn't good. It's a one-man project. The guy plays everything, and he plays everything very okay-ish. The production here is awful. It sounds bad across the board. Not a lot of dynamic range, it seems, like, because sometimes things will be louder from one song to the next. The drums are very plodding and, you know, not a lot of creative drum work. The riffs themselves are okay. The guitar tone's not. And then there's the vocals, which are like this almost kind of like groaned, growled, spoken word throughout a good chunk of this. There's so much wrong with this that I don't have a lot of positive things to say about it because in terms of like getting everything wrong, I feel like he came pretty close. Like back to the production, like this guitar tone is just thin and listless, and it isn't as though like the riffs are particularly good. In fact, like there's a section on here where I thought he was playing the Munsters theme, and with as thin as the guitars are, it didn't necessarily have like a good metallic sound to it. It just sounded like, well, you're playing surf rock on a broken guitar. But the bass is really up in the mix, and the bass often, you know, kind of drowns out the guitars, which, I mean, it doesn't take that much. The playing on here isn't very clean, and in terms of like the song structure, like the melodies feel off. Like when they're trying for like a big lead melody on top of a riff, it just feels like it doesn't match up completely. Like these songs feel very, very par-baked. And in terms of like songwriting dynamics, like you have moments that you can kind of feel like there's a bit of a build to them, and then the payoff just isn't there. Like the song's energy just drops like a stone. There's points in here I'm not even sure the guitars are even in tune. Like I felt like I was like listening to a Dark Throne album that I ordered on Wish. As much as I don't want to dog this dude's first effort, there's really not a lot I can pull from here that was really good. Like this feels like, you know, a teenage band's first band rehearsal where like none of them really know what they're doing. The instruments aren't in tune. You could hear maybe one of their parents yelling in the background to turn that shit down. But hey, you know, he gave it a whirl. I don't know if there's other albums by this project. I might check it out just to see if it did get better, but no, this is not good. Like the best thing about it is probably the artwork. But if you're curious, I don't have anything I can really compare this to flat out. But as always, there are going to be links to all the music down in the description. So if you choose to and want to check this out, you can definitely do that. And if by chance you find this to be a very enjoyable, rewarding listen, then more power to you, because this was easily the worst thing I think I've heard this year so far. But still, check it out. For my own opinions, who knows? You might absolutely love it. I just didn't. So, yep, there we go. And that does it for this collection update. And fair warning, the next one is probably going to be a lot longer. I got sent some more stuff, and, while ordering new albums that we have reviewed, of course, I ordered other albums that we didn't. So yeah, I'm going to get cranking on these, collection updates, at least like another 2, and then I'll probably get back to States of Metal because I definitely want to cover some more Midwest stuff. And then after that, who knows, might do some like heavy or not metal. I don't know, I got a lot of options. Either way, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We also have memberships. They're only 99 cents, and our lone perk is doing a members-only live stream where we talk about, honestly, whatever the hell you guys want to talk about. It's kind of a wide open sort of forum. Occasionally we might have a theme, but we are like ADHD manifest into human form, so it's eventually going to go off the rails. But memberships are the new way to support the channel more directly. We also have our store, thrallsmetal.com, with our t-shirts and hats. That is linked down below. And of course, if you would like to become a member of this channel, there's a join button somewhere down here. So click it if that sounds like a good idea. And of course, thank you guys so much for literally everything you guys do. All the support over the years has just been absolutely amazing. I know I say the same shit like at the end of every fucking video, but I mean it. You guys absolutely roll. You guys keep us going, and we're looking forward to overloading you guys with even more content in the future. So one more big thank you, and we will catch you later.